It was Halloween night, and the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a strange, warm glow over the streets of New Orleans. A light mist rolled in, enveloping everything in a shroud of mystery. Costumed children darted through the streets, their laughter and shouts mixing with the eerie chill in the air. Yet there was one place the trick-or-treaters would cross the road to avoid, the house they called the Bayou of Bones. The house stood alone at the end of a crooked street, its paint peeling and its windows darkened, but not smashed, as nobody dared inflict damage upon the property due to the things that had gone on there many years before, and the mythical figure who had carried those atrocities out. Old Halloween decorations hung limply from the porch, an unsettling contrast to the rot and decay, and nobody was ever sure who had actually put those decorations there, or who even dared to, as the air around the place was heavy with unspoken warnings. The stories of long-gone victims haunted the town, along with whispers of the evil being who once dwelled there. He had supposedly been a sorcerer of the dark arts, renowned for sacrifices committed in the name of his gods. Women, children, and entire families were said to have been summoned to his lair, maybe taken there under false pretenses, or perhaps by a power they could not resist. Once there, their lives were snuffed out, their souls absorbed into his twisted magic. It was said that on moonless nights, you could still hear the cries of those he had sacrificed, echoing from inside. It was Halloween, and three of us, my friends Marcus, Jonah, and myself, we had decided to head into a different part of town, as trick-or-treating in our neighborhood had always proven pretty fruitless. At around 8 p.m., we'd already managed to get more candy than we'd had in the previous 3-year Halloweens. We were feeling good, excited, and happy, but then we noticed there was no other kids rushing past us, and in fact we were walking alone. It was then that Marcus, the most brazen and curious of us, stopped and said, "Whoa, take a look at that," and we all turned around to see a big, empty-looking house. It had wide steps leading up to a wraparound porch. The windows looked intact, but each one seemed darkened by what looked like years of neglect. It was a really impressive building, but there was something about it I found instantly unsettling. It felt like the house was watching us, waiting for us to step closer. "You kids know where you are?" came a voice from behind us. We turned to see two older kids, both on bikes. "You mean 'cause we're white?" Marcus asked. The guy who'd spoken started to laugh, and then looked at his friend. "How about this kid?" He then looked back at us with a smile. "No kid, not because you're white. I don't care about any of that. I mean this house. I hope you're not all thinking about going and knocking on that door. You should keep your feet well off that land." We all stared at the house once again, before looking back at the two guys. "What's wrong with it?" I asked. "I mean, apart from the fact it looks creepy." "You ever heard of Papa Soulbinder?" the same kid asked. "No," said Marcus, "but it's a cool name." "Yeah, well, he wasn't a cool guy. He was a wicked man who practiced voodoo rituals in that house. Back in the 1950s, started off with people's pets going missing. Then it was people, the type who were down on their luck, and he thought nobody would miss. Then it seemed to just be anybody, men, women, kids. But one girl got away, and she ran home and told her parents what she'd seen inside of that place. Bodies hanging up in different rooms, with bits missing. Some folks were still alive, kept in cages like animals. It was carnage in there, but yet nobody ever thought to go check. The police didn't come around here too much, and everyone knew that that man wasn't right. The way he dressed with his weird jewelry and that strange hat. Folks say he had eyes that looked dead, and everybody just avoided him. Once the neighborhood found out about him, they came here and broke down his door. They say they found him. He was in some kind of trance. They also found the remains of over 100 bodies, so they say. Mostly human, so they carried him outside and strung him up to that big tree on the left. But even when the rope snapped tight, he didn't wake. Just swung there, back and forth. So they set him on fire and left him hanging there, his body rotting over the weeks, months, left him there until he was not much more than a skeleton. But then one morning, that corpse was gone, the noose empty. In the weeks following, the men that had strung him up, along with the man who'd set him alight, all vanished without a trace. Some people say those who followed Papa Soulbinder came and took them, as some kind of payment for their former master, but some say it was Papa Soulbinder himself, back from the dead and out for revenge. They had some lady come here, or a witch or something, and then she put a curse upon that house, trapping his soul inside, and from what I hear, It would take a foolish person to go in there, and then the spilling of human blood to set him loose. But ain't nobody around here been stupid enough to set foot in there to this day. Geez, I said. Marcus then spoke. That's a cool story, bro. But that's the thing with you black folks, huh? I don't mean that in a bad way. Just that you folks get all caught up in that voodoo stuff and are all superstitious. Again, the two older kids swapped glances and laughed. Kid, this ain't a black or a white thing. It's a be dead or not be dead thing. Anyway, you guys take care and stay safe. And with that, the two of them cycled off and left us standing and looking at each other. I'm not gonna lie, that story creeped me out, Jonah said. Yeah, me too, I agreed. But goddamn if it didn't make me want to go in there, Jonah continued, and he started to laugh. That's exactly how I feel, said Marcus. Let's go inside. Are you guys crazy? I asked. The guy who lived there used to kill and chop up innocent people. It's just a load of crap, Marcus said. These type of neighborhoods always have some weird stories. And what if this one was real? I asked. I mean, Papa Soulbinder sounds pretty goddamn scary. I say we go to a few more houses, then go in there before we go home, Jonah suggested. I'm in, Marcus said. Seriously, guys, I objected, but Marcus cut me off. You need to stop being such a pussy, Charlie. I mean, seriously, just man up a little. Yeah, Charlie, you are being a bit of a pussy. Let's just have some fun. It's Halloween. After some debating, I ended up being outnumbered, so the plan was to grab some more candy and then end the night with a scare before heading home. And after another successful hour or so, the moment was upon us. And once again, we stood outside that large, looming property. My two friends slowly made their way towards the front stairs, and I held back. I don't think I'm coming in, I said. Suit yourself, pussy, Marcus replied, and the two of them laughed as they made their way up the stairs and tried the handle of the door. It's open, Jonah said. Of course it's open, I said, loud enough for them to hear me. The house wants you to go inside. But before I could finish my sentence, they had passed through the front door. 10 minutes passed, then 20, and other than the sound of the door closing, I didn't hear another sound. Until I did. And it didn't come from inside the house, but from just behind me. And the sound itself, well, it was pretty clear, and it was close. It was the sound of something heavy swinging from the branch of the big tree. I could hear the fibers of the rope straining around the weight of whatever they were holding. I span around, but there was nothing there. Yet it was still enough to make me run towards the house and at least have the comfort of my friends. I slowly entered, calling out their names as I shifted inside. The interior was a grotesque gallery of Halloween horror. Skeletons hung from the ceiling, cobwebs thick enough to trap 1,000 insects. Pumpkins, albeit moldy, littered the floor. I called out again, but what came back to me was not the reply of my friends. Strange noises rattled the air, whispers that seemed to call out, and the very faint sounds of drums that beckoned from the shadows. Every step deeper into the house felt like stepping further away from reality, as if the very walls had absorbed the sins of the past. I explored the downstairs, but each room was just like that last, full of weird and altogether too realistic-looking Halloween decorations, along with at least 70 plus years of dust, damp, and decay. Once I felt sure my friends were not on the lower portion of the house, I stood looking up the wide staircase. I called out again, but of all the strange yet faint sounds I could hear, my friends' voices were not among them. I stood not knowing what to do, but then the sound of breathing coming from not far behind me pushed me onwards, ascending the stairs as fast as my legs could carry me, hoping that I'd see the annoying yet welcoming faces of my friends at any moment. The upstairs landing was dark, but somehow held an eerie glow. Along the floor were a row of pumpkins, all with candles inside. There were windows, but I could see that they were painted black, so the light from the pumpkins was all I had to work with. I slowly explored the hallway to my right-hand side, but as I ventured deeper, the shadows grew darker, and the air thickened with an oppressive force. I began to sense something looming, waiting, just out of sight. Finally, there was only one door left, and I could see light coming from the bottom of it. Were my friends hiding in there, waiting to jump out on me? If so, why the light? Then I became overwhelmed by the feeling that I should not enter that room. However, the sound of the slow, heavy footsteps coming up from the stairs caused my heart to hammer in my chest. I stood frozen, covered in sweat, looking down the hallway and waiting to see what would reach the top of the stairs and turn to face me. When the feet sounded just seconds away from reaching the upper floor, I could bear it no longer and ran into the only room I hadn't explored. I slammed the door shut behind me and then turned. Both of my friends were pinned to the wall by large steel pins which looked to have been hammered into their hands and feet. They were stripped down to their underwear, eyes wide, mouths open, and stuffed with some kind of meat. I wondered for a second if they were alive and just scared, but then I noticed the gaping holes in their chests. "No," I said, but it was barely more than a whisper. I felt my knees weaken, and it was then I saw, on what looked like a shrine in the corner of the room, my friends' hearts. It took me a second to realize they were still beating. My head span, my jaw hung loose, sweat covered my skin. I reached for the door handle. I pulled the door open and stumbled out into the hallway. I staggered forward, but stopped as a black swirling mist began to form and rise, the color and density filling the space in front of me, creating what looked like a void. And it was from the abyss that Papa Soulbinder slowly emerged. Tall, broad, and imposing, his eyes glinted with malice beneath the paint of his face, dark and grotesque. He wore a tattered top, the fabric still dripping with the essence of his heinous crimes.
"So what do we have here?"
he said, in a voice deeper than any man should be, and it sent a sinister echo that rattled my bones.
"It's been so long since anyone dared venture into my home. How brave of you all,"
he said with a smile. "Please, I just want to go home," I said, tears beginning to stream down my face.
"Oh, do not fear, young one. I am not going to harm you. Your friends' lives were all it took to get me back here. You will see your people again."
I felt a small glimmer of hope. Really?
"Of course. In time I will need more blood, more flesh. But for now, I have had enough to give me the strength I needed to return. There is one small thing I need from you, though."
And with that, before I could speak, he rushed towards me and seemed to transform back into that black mist he'd emerged from. I screamed as whatever he was neared me, the pitch of my voice higher than I'd ever heard it before. The next thing I remember was being carried out of the house. I was dizzy, but I could make out the face of one of the older kids who'd warned me not to go in there in the first place. The cops were called, and I went off in an ambulance, treated for shock as far as I can remember. When the police went into that room, candles were out, and the bodies of the boys were not on the walls. All that was left was a pile of dust on the floor. Pretty sure some of that dust was proven to contain a little of what was left of Marcus and Jonah, but the killer was never found. And over the years I've read stories about folks coming up missing in that town, never to be seen again. I guess you're thinking I was probably lucky to get out there that day, that I could have ended up like my friends. And I guess, to a degree, you're correct. However, I didn't get away without a scratch that day. No, I might have looked okay, but once I got home, I felt there was something wrong. Something missing, and as time went on, I slowly started to realize what it was. You see, I stopped feeling. Never got angry, never got sad, never got scared or excited, but mostly, I didn't love. I looked at my family and felt nothing. I've lost family since that day, and I felt nothing. See, the evil practitioner of voodoo didn't let me get away scot-free. They call him Papa Soulbinder for a reason, and I know that he took my soul and bound it to something, or maybe he traded it in, sold it. Perhaps when my body finally reaches its end and I'm placed into the ground, I'll lay there peacefully, but something will be there, in the dark, watching, waiting. The autumn wind picked up, in turn shaking the last of the leaves from the trees which stood in the garden of the small house. Inside, given that the night was drawing in, the kitchen was filled with the warm glow of candles which cast shadows on the walls. Isla sat at the table, hunched over a pumpkin, struggling with her small, jagged plastic knife, Her brow furrowed in concentration, and teeth gritted in anger as the jagged lines of the face she tried to carve were all wrong. "I can't do it, Mom," she said. "It doesn't look right. It never looks right." Lena, her mother, who was used to her daughter's tantrums, smiled softly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Calm down. It's just a practice, Isla. You'll get the hang of it. Besides, it's almost Halloween. Nothing has to be perfect this time of year. Surely the more messed up things are, the better." Isla pouted, looking down at the mutilated pumpkin. "I wanted them to look real, though. They just look garbage. I hate Halloween." Lena gave her daughter a look of disapproval. "Stop acting like a baby. You're almost 12 years old. I'm just popping across the street to Jenny's. Are you sure you don't want to come?" "No, it's boring. I want to stay here," Isla said. "I want to get these pumpkins right." "Well, I guess it's lucky your mom was clever enough to buy 10 of them. How many have you used?" "7, Isla replied. "Okay, well, take your time. Don't rush it. And try to stop getting so angry. If you need me, message me, or just come over. I trust you to be responsible." "I'm not a baby, Mom. I'll be okay." "No, you aren't. So just remember that when you're getting angry at those cute little pumpkins who haven't done a thing to you." Isla rolled her eyes, took a sip of her juice, and then took a fresh pumpkin and sat looking at it. Her mind trying to work out the best way to go about her work. "I'll be back soon," Lena said. "No need to rush," Isla replied bluntly, without looking at her mother. Lena shook her head and left the house. It was only a 20-second walk from her house to Jenny's, and Lena had started feeling comfortable enough to leave her daughter at home while she went to visit her friend. Whilst there, she would glance out of the window now and again and look over at her house, just to see if everything looked okay, or she would message Isla to come and wave by the front window, which her daughter would always do, and in turn, it put her mind at rest. She'd been a little concerned about her daughter's behavior as of late. Isla had always been a little temperamental, a deep thinker, a girl who didn't like to be spoken to like a baby or a child. Her mother was pretty sure that Isla was going to be a leader as she got older, as she'd never met a girl with such a strong will. The pumpkins were a prime example. Yes, she was getting angry and frustrated, but her mother knew that Isla would not stop until she had achieved what she set out to do. As she approached her friend's house, Lena saw Jenny handing out sweets to 5 children, who didn't look any older than 5 or 6 years old. All of them were dressed up, but the outfits they wore looked old and tatty, and coupled with greasy, unkempt hair and grimy faces. It was obvious these were underprivileged kids from a few blocks away. They turned and looked at her as she neared the front door. "Aren't you guys a day early?" she asked them with a smile. They all looked a little sheepish, but finally, a tiny girl with blonde hair, wore a witch's hat, spoke. "If we come tomorrow, everyone will have had all the treats, so we should get more if we come a day early. Plus, last year the big kids stole all our candy." "Well, that's really mean of them. Some people are so greedy," Lena said, before glancing around. "Didn't your mom or dad tell him off for taking your stuff?" Again, none of the other children spoke, so the cute little witch spoke again. "Our parents all think we're okay to come on our own, as there's a group of us." "I see," Lena replied. "I guess if they did come with you, then it would stop those big mean kids from stealing from you." The confident little blonde girl's face suddenly took on a look of sadness. "Yeah, I guess." Lena suddenly felt bad. "Well," she said with a smile, "I hope you all get loads more candy, and I love the costumes, guys." The group all smiled, walked away, and continued on their little pre-Halloween haul. "Those kids were so cute," Lena said, as she sat at Jenny's kitchen table drinking a glass of wine. "I know, right?" Jenny replied, "and also tiny. I felt like I needed to get them in and give them all a good bath, but I don't think it would go down too well in the neighborhood." "I can't believe their parents let them out on their own," Lena said. "I guess it teaches you to grow up quicker, but it's so dangerous out there these days. It only takes a moment. You turn your back and tragedy strikes." "You're damn right there," Jenny replied. After about half an hour of chatting, Lena's thoughts shifted to the group of little children in their dirty clothes. She picked up her phone and typed a message to her daughter. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything is fine, Mom." Lena typed back, "How are the pumpkins looking?" Her daughter replied straight away, "They are looking really good. I can't wait to show you." "That's great. I can't wait to see them. I'll be home soon." "Okay, love you, Mom." "Love you too, Isla. See you soon." "She okay?" Jenny asked. "Yeah, thankfully she's cheered up a bit at least. She has her moments, but there really is a lovely girl in there for the most part. I actually daydream of how she's going to be when she gets older, and that little temper of hers eases off. She will be a force of nature, I imagine." Jenny replied. 40 minutes or so later, Lena said her goodbyes and left her friend's house and headed home. When she reached the house, the porch light was off, which was strange given that it was on an automatic timer. Lena felt the thick heaviness of the quiet pressing against her skin as she unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Isla?" she called softly. No answer. A strange smell hung in the air, something metallic and sharp, mixed with the faint scent of candle wax and rotten pumpkin. Lena frowned, her heart beginning to race. As she moved through the hallway, she noticed the eerie glow of candlelight spilling from the living room, and the smell grew stronger. As she moved through the hallway, she noticed the eerie glow of candlelight spilling from the living room. The smell grew stronger. She stepped into the room, her breath catching in her throat. Isla was sitting on the floor, her back to Lena, small hands busy with something in front of her. The room was unnervingly quiet, except for the soft sound of squishing and scraping. "Hi, Mommy," Isla said, not looking around as she was too engrossed in whatever she was doing. And then Lena saw them. The couch was lined up with all but one of the small, innocent children she had spoken to earlier that evening, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their skin, once soft and innocent, had been carved into, their features either gone or heavily distorted. Those once adorable faces had been transformed into grotesque masks, with hollow gaping eyes staring out of skin that had been butchered. Lena's stomach lurched. She couldn't scream. She couldn't move. Isla turned slowly, her hands stained with blood. Bits of skin in their hair was clinging to her fingers. Lying across her lap was the small body of the girl who had been the most vocal of the group, but it was only the costume which gave it away, and everything above the shoulders looked unrecognizable. Isla's expression was more calm than it had ever been, almost serene. She smiled up at her mother, eyes shining in the candlelight. "I figured it out. Now they look more real. Can we put them outside tomorrow for everyone to see? Please?" Lena took a step backwards and then felt herself falling into unconsciousness. As everything faded to black,